someone's email a public comment now? Okay. I was actually gonna ask that question.
What was it?
Is Sumner's email to most of us commissioners a public comment?
Yes, did it not go to everyone?
Didn't go to April, but she's not here.
It should go into the record.
Yep, it should go to the record. Jim finally read it. Did you read it?
So general comment.
It's very specific.
So we're ready to start again? Oh, so for this. Okay.
Well, the time is 6:01. Call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for October 23rd, 2022 for the city of Glenwood Springs. This is our regular meeting. And please call the roll.
Commissioner Waller, Commissioner Connerton,
Present.
Commissioner Shaver,
Here.
Commissioner White, Commissioner Wissing, Commissioner Sipperly,
Here.
Commissioner Hardcastle,
Here.
Commissioner Weimer, Commissioner Davy.
Okay, thank you. Item number 2 on the agenda is receipt of the minutes of July 26, 2022. And we have, what, 2 people here that were actually attending the meeting? Would you,
He's not.
If I may suggest that we continue consideration of the minutes.
do we need a motion for that, to that effect?
Yes, and a voice vote would be fine.
I move to continue the receipt of the meeting minutes from July 26th to the next regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission in September.
And I will second.
Okay, voice vote, all in favor? Aye.
I
Opposed? Comments from citizens appearing for items that are not on the agenda. And there's no one in attendance here, so I don't know if there's anything online. No, so we'll close that portion of the meeting and go to new items, which is consideration of code text amendments to Municipal Code Title 070.
Okay, and then I have to share screen, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so for consideration today is planning file 2322. Code amendments, including section 704110 sign code and section 703030 use specific standards. So basically, yeah, 2 items is sign code and then use specific standards. That is a minor text revision to language in for accessory tourist rentals. So first is again, so applicant being city, location, it will affect everything citywide, all zoning districts, and also all sign districts. So again, just a summary, action item 1, just consideration of code amendment changes. Staff recommends approval of the proposed code amendments. And then again, since it's a code amendment, it will be Planning and Zoning Commission is the recommending body. So you'll either recommend approval to City Council, who would make the final decision, denial. You could also continue the item, or I think remand back to staff. So those are your options. Then again, your criteria. So proposed amendment consistent with comprehensive plan and city policies. It doesn't conflict with other provisions of code. Proposed amendment is necessary to address a demonstrated need. Proposed amendment is necessary to respond to substantial changes in conditions. Or 5, the proposed amendment is consistent with the general purpose and intent of the code. So just in general, so kind of a crash course with sign code regulation. So sign code, you can regulate things like location, size, height, materials, illumination, but there are things that you can't regulate because then you get into basically free speech issues. And that's like content, purpose, and to some extent, who's applying. Kind of a general rule of thumb is if you have to read the sign to regulate it, that's probably not a good regulation. It should just be all things that aren't concerned with, the actual type of the sign or text. So just a couple things is kind of a introduction. And so, for example, so in our code, we do regulate sign type. And so these are just some examples of, so we separate into things being freestanding signs and then also attached signs. So you can have a pole sign, that would be an example of freestanding sign, a monument sign on a base, freestanding. Then you have some attached signs, roof sign, wall sign. These are not pictures from Glenwood, as you can probably tell. Well, one is projecting, suspended, canopy, and then portable. And then we also have a whole section of code that deals with signs that don't need permits. So, but these are the main ones that would require a permit in the majority of our regulations concerned with. And we'll be talking tonight specifically for pole signs and monument signs. So that's what we'll be looking at. And then another way that signs are regulated in Glenwood is by sign district. So this is sort of similar to zoning, just in the same ideas that you have these different zones of the city, and they were created just kind of thinking of the characteristics of each area. So you can see there's downtown, kind of North Glenwood, Glenwood Meadows area. And so again, there's specific regulations that correspond as well to each district. And then again, it also code will also refer to how the property is utilized. So a residential use would have different sign requirements than a non-residential use. So these are just different ways that sign code regulates signage in the city. So specifically, staff has identified 2 items for sign code amendments, and both address freestanding signage with residential uses. And so the first change is to amend code to allow monument type signage for residential uses. And that would be in the form of like a residential subdivision. Right now, that's not allowed. And then the second is to amend code to prohibit pole signs for residential uses. And there's also, on this following slide there's also suggested changes for adjusting the maximum size and height for, again, these monument signs for residential uses. So specifically the monument signs for residential applications. So this is the kind of sign that you would be looking at for a residential use, typically like a subdivision. Right now, it's not allowed. And so staff was looking at, this is a type of signage that's pretty common, welcome to such and such subdivision. So that's the intent of that. Now, however, with this language, what staff doesn't find compatible is just like a single family house wanting to put a monument sign in your front yard. And so the suggested change is all residential uses, excluding single family detached dwelling, 2-family dwelling, and accessory dwelling uses. So it'd be mainly looking at allowing it for like a multifamily use, or actually really here with this next page is you'd be looking, these are all the residential uses. So it would be allowed for something like a multifamily dwelling. It would be allowed for mobile home park. It would be allowed for nursing home. And again, just excluding single family detached homes, 2-family dwelling, and accessory dwelling units. So the distinction, prohibiting it, single family, lower density residential uses, allowing it for things like a residential like subdivision or an apartment building. And then going back to that also, and this is where Planning and Zoning Commission could probably have some further discussion on, is then looking at, okay, well, if they're going to be allowed for residential uses, because as the text up top, currently they're only allowed in commercial zoning districts, which is a very, very specific application. So the question of planning and zoning is, if this change were to be made, again, what would the maximum size be or maximum height be? And there's been some suggested changes you can see. So existing code is on the top, current proposed changes is an underline below. And so staff proposed a maximum sign area of 64 square feet. That matches what's currently allowed for everything else for the downtown district. So again, maybe a little bit smaller in scale. And then also just suggested 4 feet for residential. Again, these are residential uses, not a commercial use. And that would be something too where we could have further discussion on setting that. So that's the proposed changes for monument signs and residential uses. And then similarly, the second part of this is right now, pole signs would be allowed for some residential uses in certain sign districts. And so that would allow residential use right now, the way code exists, to install a 16 to 20 foot pole sign up to 200 square feet size for any residential use. So staff found that's kind of an incompatible use. Not that everyone's looking to do that in their front yard, but again, that the way code reads right now, that would be allowed. And so pole signs, again, that's more of, this style sign, more of a commercial use. And so again, existing code is above, and then proposed changes are below. And so staff would recommend, so being limited and adding the language mixed use and non-residential applications in these sign districts. And actually, if we just go back here, so right now, those sign districts, you can't have a pole sign in the downtown sign districts, but all the other parts of town you could. So for example, like in the Highway 82 South District, that encompasses all of south of Glenwood. There are a lot of residential neighborhoods, even though you could still have a pole sign there. That doesn't quite make sense. And so that, again, just prohibiting that specifically from residential uses and just for mixed use and non-residential applications. Now, one part of that would be is that, again, because mobile home parks and nursing homes are considered a residential use, that would not allow in the future any mobile home park or nursing home to put in a pole sign. So again, that would be part of that. But also staff feels that, again, these are residential uses and a pole sign isn't really, it's more of a commercial, if you think about like I-70 when you're driving, you don't necessarily maybe need a pole sign to find, a mobile home park or a nursing home. So that you could go with the monument sign, which was kind of the part of that first change, allowing that instead of the pole sign. And also too, just to be clear, prohibiting pole signs would not prohibit flagpoles. That's separately regulated. You can still have a flagpole, can have it as tall as your maximum height set by zoning district. So those are separate things. So I guess any questions? Because the next part of this is all the second accessory tourist rental change. So
Great, thanks, Emery. Yeah, I think it's good to discuss the sign part and then go on to the next. Yeah. Questions for Emery? I have going back to one of those signs, and I was looking at the code, how they define showing the 8 sides and all of that sort of thing to figure out an area. On a monument sign, is the structure, so like the Greymont, is all the stone and the wood included, or is it just the sign itself? How is that defined?
it would be the whole thing. Because the height, right? I didn't want to look that up, actually.
I mean, the example shows a barbershop sign,
Yeah.
which doesn't have the features that a monument might. Or the 3-dimensional one.
So the height, most certainly. The size of the sign, I believe, is also this.
So it'd be 4 feet to the wooden arch. Under the new proposed.
Let's look it up. But I would assume that that's the case.
Yeah, I just want to confirm since It's a great
With the
question.
pole mounted sign, we never counted the area of pole, and that is what's holding up the sign. And this, in this case, the materials are holding up the sign as well.
So at 4 feet high, the whole stone structure could be at 64 square feet, 16 feet long.
The stone isn't really doing any advertising for you.
So we do have a, and this is not an answer to your specific question. So there is a limit. Base cannot exceed 50% of the total height. And so if it were to be, and again, that was just kind of suggestion for 4, let's say 4, the base could be no taller than 2. So that is a part of it.
Like with that example, what part of the base extends to the top of the sign? So would you call that even a base?
I mean, I will say the way that it has been interpreted is, you know, the size of this whole thing. Because again, with, you can, oh, yeah, you can see this, with this particular section, just stating the height of the monument sign base shall not exceed 50% of the total sign height. So the way it's been applied is we've just looked at, okay, how large is this entire thing in total size?
And if we wanted to, we could amend, you could recommend amending the definition of monument sign to clarify that the size would be included. So you're talking about area, right? 64. square
Yeah.
feet. So I think if we're concerned about it, and you expressed some concern that pole signs would be treated differently.
Well, in measuring a pole sign, you don't measure the part that holds up the sign, you just measure the rectangle part. And here, we're actually measuring the part that holds up the sign, so they're different. And in addition, if we apply the maximum can be 2 feet, that would make that gray mont sign, which I think is pretty good looking, not legal in the city of Glenwood because the base extends above 2 feet. If you count the stone as a base.
Well, that's probably
50%.
50% of the height. Is that what?
Area.
Yeah, I mean, like Carolyn said, like this example, that would not be something that would be approved because the base extending more than 50% of the height was probably taller than 6 feet. So.
But it's a good looking sign. I mean, do we want to make it so we can't have those? I would think, no. So maybe evaluating a percentage of the sign itself as a percentage of the overall
And
Mass.
mass, you know.
And I think too, like, so like Richard mentioned, is right now we don't really, in our definition of monument sign, it doesn't specify the difference between the two and, you know, becoming the total part of that sign area.
Yeah.
So if they wanted to, they could make 6 inches of a base and then the remainder of the area of the sign.
Correct.
But a full sign, don't they measure, they'll, like, you can only go so high?
Right, but if it's a 200 square foot sign, you're not measuring the area of the pole,
Oh, I
just
see what you're saying.
measuring a 10 by 20 foot sign.
Plus height. Right?
Well, it's a different consideration. The height's one thing and then the area of the sign. is different.
Well, you know, considering that Graymont too, if the area of the sign, if it's only 4 feet to the top of the wood, the area of the sign gets pretty small. Of course, that's their choice if they're putting all this stone around it.
And 4 feet was just a suggestion. I mean, currently a residential application in a commercial zoning district is 6 feet. So that was just a, just a starting number.
Mhm.
So I figured,
Most of these signs have lights, which will probably help melt snow, but I mean, you could easily get 2 feet of snow covering up half of the sign in the winter. Hopefully they use an LED so it wouldn't melt.
How many monument signs are in town?
Well, we don't allow them now in residential districts.
so, and also another part too is no sign in a residential zoning district can be illuminated. But you could have a residential use in a commercial zoning district that could be illuminated.
But if we make this change, then you could have your monument sign in your residential district, but you can't put a light on it.
So this this change is specifically looking at the uses. So regardless of what zoning district, regardless of what sign district, you can have a monument sign. As far as illumination, that would all depend on all the other standards based on your location. So that, I mean, depending on the situation, like this is just residential uses, no matter where they are, can have a monument sign.
Can the monument sign be illuminated from within, or does that still go to the lighting
No.
category?
So that would be, so
What's the
again,
point of the sign if you can't?
well,
read
it depends
at
where
night?
you are. So if you're in the downtown core, that's canopy.
Internally illuminated signs.
Yeah, I mean, so there's all the different, so any illuminated sign visible within 300 feet of residential zoning district shall be turned off. And again, they're prohibited in residential zoning districts, so. A apartment building in a residential high density zoning district could have, if this was passed, you could have a monument sign, but it couldn't be illuminated. Now, if it was an apartment complex in the commercial zoning district, there'd be no problem. If it was a apartment building in a commercial zoning district across the street from a residential high density zoning district, they'd have to shut it off at 10 p.m. So it gets very complicated based on where it is. But again, we're just kind of looking at like for residential uses, monument signs should or should not be allowed.
So we have to bring up the lighting thing some other time.
I mean, we can discuss, I mean, again, it's up for, you can certainly recommend like additional issues. These are just kind of the two specific ones that staff had identified.
But before we move on, we did find a definition for sign area. The entire area contained within the face of a sign, including all ornamentation or decoration used to attract attention. The sign area shall be the sum of the area of all letters, words, or symbols that can be contained in lines forming the smallest plane geometric shapes around all such letters, words, or symbols having 8 or fewer segments. But I think that we could include the entire monument sign within including all ornamentation or decoration used to attract attention.
So that would be in the case we were talking about the stonework and the wooden arch would be
Correct.
included in that area.
Correct.
I think you'd have to, because sometimes somebody could propose a muted rock structure, and other times it could be a geometrically attractive sign, and then they could argue with you instead of the alternate. That doesn't add to it.
So effectively, we're counting the area of monument signs.
Be sure to use your mic.
Effectively, we're counting the area of monument signs differently than freestanding pole signs, because the thing holding up the sign, the words of the sign counts as a monument, but does not count if it's a pole sign.
I would say if you look at the example of the sign area measurement for the barber shop, that it also includes what is it fixed to?
We don't have the barber shop in our.
It's in the code.
It's in the code, and we could probably
Oh,
bring it up.
here,
Can you
actually,
bring it up?
Yeah,
So it's-
so this is this image.
Right.
Here's like a 3-dimensional.
Got it.
This is why the sign code is super hard and we don't like to bring things to talk about related to the sign code.
I mean, as far as like concern on.
You guys brought it up.
You guys brought it, but this is why we don't.
As far as like concern, if you're treating monument signs different than pole signs. I mean, each one is treated like monument sign is treated differently than a pole sign is treated differently than a suspended sign. I mean, our definitions for suspended signs is that it only hangs from an awning. So I mean, it gets really, really specific, kind of like the example about illumination. I mean, pretty much every applicant that comes in with a sign permit, I mean, we have to like sit down before they even order their sign to make sure like it, all the different things and the different locations. So as far as like, I mean, with the pole sign too, is, that's really, you have to have a single pole. That's one of the requirements. You can't have a double.
What if it's 3 feet wide? Yeah, the pole.
That's a good.
My guess is that it wouldn't happen because it's an expense that is not what the applicant is going to want to do. So, I mean, theoretically, I mean, that is the fun of planning, is that we could play the what if game forever.
I mean, I got a 3-foot stone pole with a
It
8-foot wide sign on top. It's not a monument, it's a pole sign.
You could also take a pole for a tall sign and you
freestanding.
could illuminate it. You could light it internally. You could have LED lights. And then at that point, then you could argue that's meant to attract. So that should be added to the above area. What ifs?
Right, I mean, we can't, and we have discretion, sorry, staff has discretion in interpreting the code. Yeah, I think in the way that, it's at least can be consistent, shown to be consistent from application to application. I agree with Emery. It's totally fine to discriminate between monument signs and pole signs. Like legally, the only issue is whether we're discriminating based on content. And so that's the whole purpose of having these form-based sign regulations.
So like we said, you can't advertise prices on a pole sign. That would be picking out a specific group of that's trying to communicate something, like a commercial use.
We could sort of define a monument sign as the base has to be as at minimum the width of the word part of the sign so that it's really a monument. Could a monument have 2 poles and be open in the middle, or is that not a monument sign?
So do you want the definition of monument sign? It's
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with
a
it.
freestanding ground sign typically containing design elements such as a base, columns, borders, topper, or cap specifically intended for display of the sign.
So columns. A column under each side of a sign. It's kind of a 2-pole sign, which we don't allow, but it could be a monument as well.
But what you're saying is we'd have the latitude, staff would have the latitude to interpret, discuss with you at a certain point, say, well, when does a base become a pole?
A monument.
Pole is a base, but a base isn't a
And
pole.
I would say 8 feet, because that's the maximum, well, for a commercial use or for a residential use, there's a height limit for a monument sign. So that's as tall as you can go for that style. If you keep going, that's not a monument sign anymore. And that's my initial interpretation. Is if someone came in with that, that's what I would tell them. And they might feel differently, but
Yeah, the issue is how far are they willing to take it? And typically they will realize that staff interpretation is going to.
And what do we want to see?
so I guess maybe kind of taking it, I do have a question. So as far as the residential uses that have been kind of pointed out to exclude single family, 2-family, and accessory dwelling units, there's no question with that, correct? We're just kind of looking at height,
For me.
size, and everything. Okay.
So, wait, explain that again. What are we excluding?
So for monument signs, we're looking at allowing monument signs for all of the uses, all of the residential uses,
Okay,
with the exception of a single family home a duplex or an accessory dwelling unit. So, this would, if you ever wanted to put like a big sign in your front yard saying, my house, you couldn't do it anymore.
So I have to take mine down is what you're saying?
If you already have it, yeah.
That would be a pre-existing. non-conforming sign, so you could keep it up.
Yeah.
You can't change it.
But so again, it would allow,
Grandfathered in, that's fine.
Yeah.
Could somebody put a monument up in, like, at a single family residence dwelling if they weren't advertising a particular product or a service?
sorry, can you repeat that?
If they wanted to put up a big monument for seasonal signs. If a family wanted to put up a monument, could they build one?
Oh, right now, no.
Just being clear.
Because we don't allow any
Right.
monument signs.
So but in
Yes.
subdivisions, why do I
Whole sign,
see like signs where it tells me what the subdivision is? And usually they almost look like a monument sign, but maybe I'm just hallucinating.
Yeah, and that would be, so that's like the intent of this is to allow a subdivision to do that. Because right now they
So
can't.
right now they can't, so I won't mention the subdivisions, okay.
We may have allowed it through the PUD, so we may have had something that was specific
Yeah.
to a planned unit development. Or
Yeah,
potentially, we had to change the sign code to be compliant with the Supreme
Okay.
Court ruling. So it may have been allowed previously, but we had to rewrite the entire
okay,
code.
so that makes sense to me because I've seen a few,
Mhm. Yeah, there's Cardiff
Yeah.
one has one, there's a couple other ones around
Yeah.
town. Yeah.
exactly.
Should the, unless allowed by PUD also be in the verbiage for all this? Or just PUDs
It's
always?
implied in the PUD.
Okay.
Okay,
Vary from all sorts of zoning requirements.
okay. Phew.
Well, I'm all in favor of allowing signs in, 3 family or more residential developments. So we all agree on that.
So you know where you're going now.
I think my biggest problem is if it's only 4 feet high and it's 64 square feet. It's a really long,
Don't.
I
take-
think I'd rather see 6 feet high and 64 square feet personally. I think the proportions are better. Then if it's set back 5 feet from the property line to be 6 feet tall at that point, assuming it doesn't block any view, which is also
Yeah.
mentioned in the
Mhm.
code. I don't think I would have a problem with that.
Sure.
And going back to that one example, looks like a perfectly fine sign to me for a residential multi-family use.
Yeah,
And it puts the sign more at eye level if it's a max at 6 feet, whereas you might not notice it if it was shorter and behind all the snow,
Right.
the plantings. I could live with 6.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there is a requirement that a monument sign have landscaped area around it, which can just be grass, but also too, if someone wanted to do plantings or something.
Yeah. Would enhance the whole
Yeah,
experience.
we don't want to stop them from doing that. You guys are right with 6 feet and 64 square feet? 6 feet in height for monument signs?
Yes.
that's tall. I'm thinking,
Yeah.
I mean, that's, I guess, because it's 5 foot back, right? So it's not gonna like block anything or anybody. I guess it would stand out. I mean, 6 feet, you're 6 foot, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Kind of,
I would also add to, George mentioned it,
because when you're
so,
pulling out and you can't see.
Well, there's rules about that already.
Yeah,
so that would be, so even if someone wanted to put a 6-foot sign, there are still, our engineering department would review it, and maybe if they wanted to put it up too far, engineering would say, no, that needs to come back, like you can still have it 6 feet tall, but it needs to be back here to not inhibit, traffic.
We could add more language to the residential, but for the mixed use, I think the pushback from the curb, 10 foot. Any other permanent detached signs by at least 25 feet. I think that's fairly helpful.
Maybe we keep that one at 6 foot height as suggested and not as 8 as it was.
yeah.
I'd be okay with that.
I'm okay with
And
that.
200 square feet,
So big.
that seems awfully big.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for that type of use.
Yeah, 10 by 20 foot sign. Yikes. And if it's.
Well, if it's 6 feet high,
Yeah, then it's like a city block long. Obviously, this is not in the downtown residential area, but that just seems giant.
I think so.
What about, what did Sumner say?
He's-
I think he said
wants it-
100.
He wants it to be more uniform, which makes a lot of sense because if it's more uniform.
Maximum 120 square feet.
Mhm.
That's a lot more reasonable. Still a 10 by 12 sign. I mean, that's,
It's a big sign.
yeah.
Well, if it's 6 feet high, as it's suggested, that's 20 feet long.
Yeah, and that's why I was worried about the residential one, because the more you go in height, I feel like the more they're gonna go. I don't know, I just feel like it's,
Yeah, they probably want to max out their
Yeah.
allowable signage.
To be clear, there are 3 designations there, though, 200 square feet for the Highway 6 and 82, downtown is 64, and others are 120.
Right.
Yeah, and so it's for reference, you know, you're 6 and 82, so 82 is that, 82 south is that whole south part of town. And then 6 is basically everything on Highway 6. So you could see a 200 square foot sign in those two areas. And then downtown would be your 64, and then Midtown and Red Mountain would be the 120.
Well, I'm picturing the sign that's near Pizza Hut. It's got like the mattress thing. It used to have American Furniture Warehouse. It probably says REI now. So that's one sign for the whole development, right? And so they've got to advertise 10 businesses on their one sign.
And that probably is I don't know, do you think that sign's 8 feet? That might be a legal non-conforming sign. It's a pretty tall sign.
that's a big sign.
It's got to be more than.
Yeah, it's way
that's-
taller than 8
yeah.
feet. And it's up
So-
on a hill.
You know, that would be an example of like right now, I don't think code would allow something like that. It would have to be a
But
probably
that's a
small.
pole sign.
Right.
It's actually a double pole
It's
sign. I
2
think.
poles.
Yeah, so there's
So
legal non-conforming. and-
It's allowed to be 20 feet high on Highway 6 and 82 as even as proposed. For a pole sign.
So I mean, if, you know, we had just suggested the changes. Because if you were making the residential uses smaller, it's going shorter, but again, if. You know, you're thinking landscaping and visibility, and then the fact that we would count the base as part of the sign size and height as well. That would be considerations.
Yeah, counting all this stone and decorative stuff.
Mhm.
So I think maybe 64 is too small, but I feel like 200 is way too big.
Agree,
Yeah, I agree.
agree.
What about 120?
I'll go with 120 because, well, I mean, I feel I'm not in Vegas, but I mean.
So you're
There's an
thinking
option
just
for that.
if you're in a commercial, if it's a mixed
Mixed,
or non-residential use outside of downtown, it's just 120 square feet.
yes,
Is
and
that
leave it,
you're
and just
thinking?
leave it at that. And I mean, I do agree with Sumner with the no pole signs. I hate pole signs,
Yeah.
but that's just my, you know, it just makes it so commercialized. I feel commercialized,
Right.
feel strip mallish maybe.
I would like to say no pole signs in residential districts. Or-
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
can we just tack that on there like a bill going through the Senate?
We'll just pretend. We'll just write it in really little letters. Nobody will notice.
So again, I would say since city council will be the deciding body,
Yeah.
I think what would probably be best is if you have recommendations for those sizes, you know, just kind of, we can arrive at what those will be. I mean, again, at the end of the day, city council could say, nope, we're just gonna keep them the same and just do one
Yeah.
part of this. But maybe to give them, you know, numbers, if anything, you know, staff had the suggested numbers, but again, if we just wanna, whatever we arrive at, that's what we can give the city council for them to consider.
For
Right.
64 square feet, we all agreed for residential. Correct,
I'm
Joe?
okay with that.
And then for mixed use, 120.
Both of them at 6 feet.
Yep,
Mhm.
that's fine.
Okay.
And no pole signs in residential.
No pole
districts.
sign.
Well, let's begin. I mean, we can do the monument. I like that too, because then it's easy.
It's cleaner.
6 feet and 120.
Should we talk about a percentage of the monument sign that should be the signage part and the construction part?
So right now, code does limit already, the base can be no larger than 50% of the height. So there is some language on that.
But the base cannot then exceed 50% of the height.
Correct.
3 feet, 3
Yeah.
feet.
Yeah.
So that provides a way to limit that.
But the
as-
one
as
that
is.
you showed with the stone that goes up the side,
Well, I mean, that's just the same, I mean, that would,
right, but there's nothing wrong with that sign. So if we limit the base to, no more than 65% of the overall area, logically, most of the mass goes on the bottom, so the sign's up where you can see it.
if this particular sign were submitted, I would send it back and say you need to have it wood on both sides and that base needs to be.
Then the sign
Yeah.
to the left too, it has stone going up the side and it holds the sign. I don't see anything wrong with those signs. Well, except they're not allowed here.
Yeah, Emery.
So what about a percentage? Like 65% of the sign is the maximum for non-signage sign?
Hmm.
Or
I
do,
don't know.
With
I
the
think it gets-
language of like wood, stone.
well,
other
it could be,
Material.
So the one on the left then
So-
would conform.
Sorry, this.
Is
Even,
what you
I mean,
want.
I'm just like, I mean, again, these aren't in Glenwood,
Mhm.
but
Uh-huh.
that. This is probably another bad example, because that's probably more than 50%.
Doesn't the,
Yes.
the nursing home, what's the name of that nursing home again?
renew,
Thank you. Don't they have a monument sign?
Mhm, they do.
Yeah,
but it's not a residential district.
well, it's mixed. It's mixed.
It would be in, that would be
That
considered
is a
residential
residential
use.
district.
Yeah, because it's their
Mhm.
residence. And
It's a
then-
residential use, for sure.
And it's a res-
So they have a monument sign.
that's a mixed use, isn't it?
I think it was intended to be mixed use. I think there was intended to be a medical facility on that corner where it's vacant today.
Oh,
And it's another
That-
example too.
that's so-
is it what?
Oh, I thought that property, so.
I'm not certain.
Is there any good reason why you can't have the stone up the side of the sign? I mean, why would we want to enforce that?
Or why do we want to get so specific with percentages and?
Well,
Such.
none of these nice looking signs are allowable.
Well, take the flat art on the left, the stonage on the bottom and the side is less than 50%.
Yep.
The one on the right is
Greater.
more than, but even though there's a pole, that allows for more sight distance.
Well, right, but on the left, the stone thing comes all the way up to above the
Right.
top of the
And
sign.
it would be blocked had the rusty flat iron gone all the way across. So I'm not saying that should be a limiting factor, but at what point, because the little emblem on the far left
Hmm.
is on the rock, covers up the rock. So could that arguably be part of that
There's
sign?
The
no
as well?
sign,
And-
yes,
and
the
another-
logo.
Thing I would say too is like, so again, I kind of gave my quick interpretation. And when if we get really specific with percentages and things, that does give staff less latitude to look at a sign permit and consider code. I mean, because sometimes it's, if it's 65, then I got to say, well, this is one and this is that. Sorry. Where when you deal with definitions, there is more latitude for staff to interpret a sign because people do get creative. There's some
Yeah.
companies that want to put something together and nice and attractive. And, if they make the case and say, hey, I read your code, this is how I interpret it, and this is how we designed it. Staff is able to not always say yes to it, but at least we're able to have the ability to interpret code the way it sits
Mhm.
in a way that might allow something like that, where if we do get really specific, sometimes that puts staff in a position where it's just, sorry, that's what code says.
Yeah.
And that's something we tried to do with the old, this
Yeah.
whole code thing is. to
Yeah.
Get it
And-
gritty.
Give
And
staff more leeway to.
And signage is just, I guarantee, whatever we, recommend to city council and whatever they may approve, 2 years from now, probably create a situation where someone has a legal non-conforming sign and they'll say, have this happen, and I'll say, well, we changed code in 2022. I mean, there are hundreds of signs in town, and each one is depending on, location type use has its own particular, this is what you can have on the
Right.
property, so. Yeah.
Like what would be considered, like, you know how the Meadows has the sign built into the, okay, stop laughing at me.
No, it's because
I
guess
ride
what?
my bike all over town,
There,
so, but you know how it's built into
Mhm.
the dirt or the hillside? Is that a monument sign?
it is in Glenwood Meadows, there's an entire separate sign code that,
Oh.
in addition to the one we already have, that it applies over there. So that's why I started laughing, because it's just like, there's just so many layers. But yeah, there's exactly right. That is a monument sign.
Well, if we intend to
Yeah.
give staff more latitude to consider different signs, should we take out the part about the base has to be 2 feet? I mean,
Can I
that
add-
makes the base at the bottom.
Can I add to that?
Yeah,
I think the smaller you want to make your advertisement portion of the sign, the less service you're doing your business. So at a certain point, if we say that the signage itself, because that's the whole point of a monument sign, is to bring it from way up there, bring it down, make it so, make it less obnoxious.
Mhm,
So if they want to make, let's say that rock was up the left side of the Graymont,
mhm.
so their sign is roughly 25% of the overall monument. That's their choice. If they chose to make it 50%, that's their choice.
Mhm.
But if we want to just give it a cut 50-50 and say, make it any more than that, then it's just a freestanding,
Yeah.
it's less of a monument, then it wouldn't conform to that particular allowance.
I like the 50-50 too, because like you were saying, like, maybe they just do like a big giant sign and have just like 1 foot of a base or something crazy, but I like that. Percent.
I think we should take out of there that the base has to, that the sign with the words has to be above the base.
Above.
Well, Rex, I think how you said it reads is that the base can be up to 2 feet and then there's like the sign part on
It
top.
was 50%. So however tall the
50%.
sign
Okay.
is,
So it could be.
the base
So you
cannot
could
be
put-
more than 50%.
Yeah.
If you want.
And if you chose to put Graymont down near the bottom, you put
Mhm.
rock up and over it,
Yeah.
again, you're not helping your
Like the
cause as a,
But could we do that?
yeah.
So I think,
Well, would you interpret that sign with the column on the side? That's not part of the base. Or would you consider that part of the base?
The Flatiron?
The
I'm not
Graymont.
really sure. Um,
I mean, it's an ugly sign, people. I'm sorry, Graymont.
I think that's better looking than a lot of signs we have around town. I mean,
I'm not sure. I think this would be a good example of where staff would look at code and try to interpret it and, really read the definitions and also ask the applicant to explain, because again, is at the base, it's
I feel
not
like
part of the
more than
sign.
50%,
The
yeah.
base just keeps going up.
Is it the same material? If it is, then I think you could argue that it's still part of the base.
I mean, another thing, I think, if we're on that topic, is that definition refers to the height and not the total size of the sign. So is the, this total area is your whole sign, what percentage of that is that stonework
Yeah.
rather than the height?
Mhm.
It's
And-
probably more than 50, maybe, but I
I
mean,
feel like it.
Looks to be, yeah.
But where can we drive what it is that they choose to design? You may not like it, but I like it better than a pole sign.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the other part too is, again, we are talking about residential uses, so. If someone wanted to put in a very, very heavy stone work sign, how much, is kind of compatible? I mean, in a way, that's a pretty hard scape thing if all of a sudden. It's all, 164 square feet of rock. So.
Well, the whole main level of the buildings could be flat and rock and it might, tie in together. Um,
Okay.
I would just like it to read that somehow that those signs would not be against our rules.
Here's what you
Well,
can't
the,
do.
the Graymont one, if you just make it equal and have the wood on both sides, I would say there'd be no issue, because that's probably 50% of the height.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking in my brain.
What about the depth of these? What if that thing's 5 feet thick? We only count the face of it, not the sides,
Correct,
right?
we don't go into 3 dimensions.
He doesn't want us to either.
Well,
Go bigger and then you're gonna need a building permit for
Yeah,
a
right.
structure.
that's correct. Actually, you're very right.
Would it, Does anybody ever put a monument sign that has the verbiage on 4 sides as opposed to just 2?
I've seen that.
Yeah. And are we,
So we do
Check
have,
those.
actually, though. We do have 3-dimensional sides. That's where, like, yeah, you could, but we'd count it, I think, as a 3-dimensional, and it would go
Okay,
into your
Okay.
total square footage. So. You,
Yes.
okay,
but no, I was gonna say that was on a monument, just for like the language, if. So again, we talk about sign height. Being 50%.
Mhm.
So if, you wanted to differentiate between the base and the sign. You could just do total area as opposed to height, and that. Could potentially allow something, again, maybe with more creativity with the base.
Makes sense.
I think the area solves the problem.
Right.
Do we have to decide on the percentage of area?
I mean, I would suggest a number. I mean, again, city council will take it and
Mhm.
decide on it. So again, like. Again, like, so this, maybe we just keep coming back to like this particular sign, 50% would still not get you that. But again, like the one next to it, that might be closer to 50%. And again, you can kind of see there's more sign part of it than base, so.
But the area versus height would allow somebody to design something that might be appealing, like the one on the left. Yeah. I think if we give an applicant that latitude, I think we're far better off in terms of what it is that then they choose to propose and put out there.
Mhm. Well, we're not changing the overall maximum height of the sign, but the height of the base versus the area of wordy sign versus non-wordy sign.
Yeah.
Like stone or whatever, non-wordy. Okay,
Yeah.
well, do we throw a number at council for them to start with?
So, to be clear, the idea is you would want the monument sign to be 50% of the total sign size and not the height. Is that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Or whatever percent. But a percentage of the overall sign and not based on the height.
I like 50%.
Me too.
Okay.
Like if you staff just a little wiggle room.
So does that mean that the base, the secondary materials are no more than 50%? Or is it that the word part of the sign is no more than 50%?
It would be, so it'd be the base in all materials, could not be more than 50%. So, that would still be, you'd still be looking at maximum, like a split of 50 and 50. Now, depending on how you want to align that,
Yeah.
that'd be up to you.
So your base could be 20% and your wordy sign is 80%.
Yeah.
Okay.
To not exceed a certain amount. What if they didn't have a monument base per se, and it was just a sign mounted into the ground?
Does it meet the definition of a monument sign?
It still would be, yeah,
It's just a big piece of
right,
sheet
you
metal?
don't really have a base and that's your sign. And then, you would have it at 120 square feet or 64, depending on where you are.
Right. Just to lessen the shock for staff when somebody does say, hey, here's our big metal sign, we're just gonna put it right in the ground.
Right.
Oh, you
And
are.
that's
Let them
okay.
go Right away.
We are, we were envisioning a rock
A nice-
monument
yeah,
base,
I
but you
mean-
didn't say so. So either we ask for it now or we.
I
It will
say-
still have to be affixed somehow, so probably in concrete, but
Yeah,
But if it's below grade, it wouldn't count, right?
I feel like there should be a base. Cause then we're defeating the whole monument.
Yeah, it's sort of the
idea.
point of a monument, right?
Yes,
So would you say like a secondary material, no less than 20% of the sign area or?
You're talking aesthetics, is that at that point, as long as you take it off the pole, it can be
Yeah.
considered a monument.
Yeah,
I can imagine a plasma cut metal sign,
that's what I'm picturing, yeah.
just
dug right in.
set into the concrete.
Two contrasting,
Could be
materi-
pretty cool.
two contrasting But dissimilar
Right.
materials, you could list it any way you want
I'm
to.
willing to take that chance. Marco would like it.
I would say too, something also to keep in mind is a lot of signage. So for example, if you're like a franchise or you're, you know, any kind of corporate entity, those companies usually have their own, you know, minimum requirements for
That's
like what
true.
the signs can be, which usually results in a nicer looking sign. So
Okay.
something to think about.
But they'd still have to meet our sign code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I just mean like you know, when you go like think of like all the different businesses in town, like a lot of them, they do have on their own side too, like they need certain standards, so
Mhm.
just aesthetic wise, like usually we end up seeing pretty nice signs, I think.
So we'll skip enhancing the definition of a monument sign to include more than the word sign material. So a plasma cut sheet steel embedded in the ground would be okay as a monument.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine now. I mean, it's up to 50%. You don't want to really put money into a base and you wanted to just pour some concrete and stick a sign on it. That's sure, but do that.
Okay.
You know, the idea is if we want to say, you know, the 50% to allow something. You know, but if it's fine the way it reads, we can keep it. It's not.
I'm okay with that.
I will say that it has to be designed to be consistent and compatible with the building to which the
Yeah.
signs are being attached, or that they're part of that, and they're proportional in scale and compatible design, materials, and color. So it depends.
Proportional in scale to the building.
Yes.
It says a freestanding sign.
A freestanding sign, that's a pole sign.
Actually, all pole signs and monument signs
Oh.
and portable signs are all freestanding
Okay.
signs. So they kind of roll up into that category. And so it would have to be compatible. So we would look to see whether or not the sign is compatible.
In scale, though, it says, huh?
Well, and material as well.
Oh, okay.
Material design.
So if you had a gas station that
And-
was all plasma steel looking, then great. That's when your monument
Yeah.
could be reflective of. But as soon as you put rock on the lower, steel on the upper, it doesn't have to match exactly, but it should be reflective of to some degree.
I'm confused about the scale thing, because we already defined how big the sign can be and how tall. So why are we saying it has to relate in scale? If we've already defined how big it can and cannot be.
Well, maybe scale is referring to aesthetics.
No?
Percentages.
Oh, boy. Here we go. 50.
Say a
I would
panc-
say that
It's
the reason why
Scale.
I think it's that it wants to have staff have some interpretation related to these signs. And I would say that, you know, you certainly can have a code where it says you have to have this percentage of this and this percentage of that and this percentage of this. I think that you can get to a place where everything is very cookie cutter.
Yeah.
And then it feels a little bit more suburban. So, you know, that having the latitude to be able to have something need to fit to the built environment, I think is important.
I appreciate staff having some leeway to approve, you know, slightly outside of what we're writing here.
Okay. So
Okay.
we should
Remember that.
create a motion to incorporate our thoughts to modify the staff's recommendations so that we take those recommendations, they can take those recommendations to council.
So
Okay.
freestanding is gonna go to 6 feet. We're nixing the
64.
200 for mixed use and non-residential.
So I just wrote in what I think we all have here, so all everything is underlined, so 64, 6, 120, and
Yeah.
we'll keep 6.
Mhm.
Oh,
And we're keeping the 6 feet under that mixed use, non-residential.
Yep.
Yep.
And then we've added the 50% base to sign clause.
Okay.
Okay, I can
Okay, you go.
try to
Go
make
ahead.
that motion.
Okay,
You want the section here?
Oh, I got him here. I'm just getting back to the, okay, planning file number 2322 code amendments. In consideration of the code amendment to section 04, 070, 040, 110, and 070, 030, 030.
no, we're
I-
not doing that yet.
Oh, is that only 040, 110? We will go with staff's recommendations, except for modifying under freestanding signs, table 040.12, the freestanding monuments in all residential uses excluding single-family detached, two-family dwelling and ADUs, maximum height should read 6 feet. And under freestanding monument, mixed use and non-residential applications in all sign districts, we're going to leave at the proposed 6 feet, and highway 6 and 82 sign districts, signs will be reduced to 120 square feet in area. And for monument signs, which also have the 6 feet maximum height, we would require that 50%, no more than 50% of the monument sign be constructed of the base material that is not the verbiage of the sign. Is that it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was it.
well done.
All done.
With the findings and recommendations on page 9 and 10 of the staff report.
We have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Any, so we're assuming that we're continuing with the pole sign recommendations as written in the staff report. Is that correct?
On that.
Those
was
were, you
making-
mentioned the changes, everything else that they've recommended will stay.
Did you want to do those two separate action items or?
Or
what's
shall we talk
better?
monument and then shall we go to pole sign? Because there,
If we already have the motion on the table for monuments, then I'd say. let's-
Okay,
I think it's for everything, right? Didn't you make the motion for everything?
yes, I
Yes.
believe so.
Yeah.
And just with those corrections or changes.
Okay, then we should do both. There's no reason to.
To do a
bifurcate them
second one.
into this.
well, on the sign area for pole signs, were we expecting to reduce the 6 and 24 or 6 and 82 signs to 120 square feet? Because right now they're allowed at 200 square feet. So we didn't really talk about the area of pole signs.
Right, and also height to go from 20 feet to 16 feet.
Yeah, shall we just do the monument sign and then move on to pole signs? Would that be okay?
If you have a motion on the table, somebody needs to withdraw it.
Yeah.
And start again.
Okay.
Okay, well, I referred to the table that only listed 40, 012.
That's both.
Okay,
I think we are unclear, so it would potentially be good if you could.
well, I'll pull my motion from the table. Maybe we can talk about the pole signs and do all this at once.
Okay,
Okay, I
Yeah.
rescind my motion. Well, second year.
yes, I will second.
Okay, okay, pole sign.
All right, pole signs.
Should have recorded that.
Yeah,
That was so good too, really.
Um,
Okay, so freestanding sign.
we pretty much hate pole signs.
so Emery, you haven't really addressed this too much, right? The pole sign
Yeah, so
aspect.
the main intent of what staff was suggesting here is basically. You can have a pole sign in a residential neighborhood right now in
Mhm.
specific sign districts. So like Cypress Avenue, that's in Highway 82 sign district. You can throw up a pole sign in your front yard,
20
20 feet
feet high.
tall, and I would sign off on it and say have a nice sign.
20 feet by 10 feet, sign,
Uh-huh.
20-foot pole.
Which just staff finds that's incompatible and we just would like to kind of tighten that up. Didn't really look into the other stuff because a lot of the pole signage that already exists is, Highway 82, it's already existing. I could consider, different heights or different square footages, but the main concern was just that's an incompatible use for residential use. And like I said, it would mean that a mobile home park or a nursing home could not have a pole sign. But again, staff looked at it and kind of thought, well, those are residential uses anyway. I don't think that's really, if I'm driving down I-70, maybe I want to know where the gas station is. But do I necessarily need to know where Sunny Acres is from I-70? So that's kind of the distinction. And that's really just what tightening that up is the concern here. So.
Okay, well, I don't think you're gonna get any argument up here for.
No, but do we blow the whole thing up and try and change this area and the height of pole signs right now, or move it to a different discussion? I mean, we're looking at this code section. Chair?
Is there any issue from an agenda standpoint that we go beyond the scope of the original agenda?
I think the notice
It was noticed.
reference this section generally.
So
I will say that,
How about it?
we didn't necessarily let anyone know about these kinds of changes. And I think that we generally try to let folks know if we're going to make these changes. So no, I don't think that there's a procedural issue. But we may try to do some outreach before the city council meeting because we do like to provide as much notice for folks who are being impacted by changes to the code. We're not perfect at it, but we do try.
And I would also say, I didn't spend a whole lot of time looking at what existing pole signage there is in town. Just sort of found this and was like, I don't like the sound of that. We need to, not allow residential uses for pole signs. I mean, if you want to suggest something to city council, between now and city council, staff, we could certainly look at it. But again, like I said, I didn't go around and do an inventory of how big is the Arby's sign, how big is 7-Eleven.
Well, how about we just decide on the residential or, not allowing them in a residential use? And then maybe revisit this and let Emery come back with some more information so we can make.
I like that.
I like that.
I think that's a good idea. And we have so many districts. I think that would be worthwhile to look at that again.
Like
And,
how,
and
yeah.
just, I know the sign thing is huge. And I don't know how many pages are addressing that as opposed to the rest of the code, but I think it's significant. But I think it would be worthwhile to get more information and delve into it to a greater extent.
Agreed.
Okay. So
Okay,
Okay,
I move.
you got this?
Try
Oh,
again.
I'm gonna be so impressed.
Let me go back to the top. I move regarding planning file number 2322 code amendments. Planning and Zoning Commission will approve code revisions to section 07004 or suggest code revisions to council for code section 070040110 regarding both freestanding monuments and pole mounted signs with the following changes. Freestanding monuments will be allowed up to 6 feet in height and will be allowed in all residential uses excluding single-family, detached, 2-family, and accessory dwelling units. Freestanding monuments and mixed-use and non-residential applications shall be limited to 120 square feet in all districts other than the downtown districts. And in terms of freestanding pole signs are only allowed in mixed use and non-residential applications in the Midtown West 6th Street, West Highway 6, South Highway 82, and Red Mountain districts. And going with all other staff recommendations and findings on page 9 and 10 of the staff report.
Can I just ask one point of clarification? Did you intend for it to be 120 square feet in all districts except for the Denton district, or 64 also in residential?
How you had it was 64 in downtown districts and 120 square feet in all other districts, including Highway 6 and Highway 82 and others.
Did you mention the percentage?
Oh, no, and the percentage of freestanding monument signs base is to not exceed 50% of the overall sign area.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner.
Are you
Super.
clear? On,
I'm clear, but I think we have it recommended to be 64 feet
Yeah, I don't think we did.
when it's all group living uses, residential uses, excluding single family residential dwelling, 2-family dwelling and accessory dwelling uses, but I don't think that's what you said.
I think she skipped over it, but I think if we leave it as is, then it's.
The
It wasn't a change.
staff suggested a maximum sign area of 64 square feet in all group living uses and residential uses, so we think that's good.
I think you should make it part of the motion because you said all other districts. So I think that it was unclear. So I would add it to what you said.
Okay. Do I have to do it all over again?
No.
You'd say you're still working on the motion. I'm fine with ongoing. Jenna's writing down.
Okay,
64 only in the all group living.
There you go.
so for a maximum sign area for a freestanding monument in all group living uses and residential uses, except single family detached, 2-family dwelling and accessory dwelling units, maximum sign area of 64 square feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll second. Good,
Go to the
goodness.
dentist.
Good.
Are we good?
I
Okay.
second that motion. Woo. Do I need to repeat it though?
No.
Are you making a second?
I did, I second.
Okay,
All done.
we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
No.
Seeing none, we'll call the question.
Turn on the lights.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Emery, on to 7330.
This is a lot, this is a lot. This is less complicated than sign code.
This was supposed to be a quick and
Very,
easy night.
very straightforward.
They're never bad.
So this has to do with, so specifically for accessory tourist rentals. So these are vacation rental permits. Staff did find language in code, which actually defines single family. So in this no longer exists in code. It existed before the 2018 rewrite. Somehow it ended up here. So the previous code defined a family to mean one or more persons living together in a dwelling unit, but can't include more than 5 people. That's been removed from code, and the way that we regulate that now is through the International Property Maintenance Code, which looks at square footages of spaces and determines how many people can go into that space. It doesn't go into, defining what a family is and how that's determined, who's related to who and all that. A municipality can have that in their code, but we got rid of it because you get into some legality and possibly fair housing law problems. So basically right now what we have here is the above, and this is use and occupancy for an accessory tourist rental. So you can't have in that bedroom used for that rental, you can't have more than 2 persons. And this just, again, has that family definition, which again, we don't have in code anymore. And so the suggested change is just occupancy of the accessory tourist rental shall be established by the International Property Maintenance Code and shall be listed on the accessory tourist rental permit. And when someone gets an accessory tourist rental permit, they have a building inspection. The building inspectors go out there. Building department is in charge of setting occupancy for things. They look at it. And so again, this is just correcting this and removing a reference to something that no longer exists in our code. So it doesn't really change anything other than removing something that's not relevant.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Wow,
Okay.
sounds good.
Yeah,
Wow.
nothing changes. It's still limited to, and get rid of that. And then it matches short-term rental. That's in the same definition. So,
Any questions for Emery
Mm-mm.
from the commission?
No.
Okay,
Does this one go to council or is this our decision?
no, this will also go to council. It's in the
Oh, okay.
text.
it's code.
So it's
Okay,
more of just a housekeeping one.
I'll make a motion. If you'd like, are you calling?
Please, yes,
Are you
please,
calling?
please.
Okay. Carolyn. For section 070.030.030 use specific standards. I make a motion on for the accessory tourist rentals to remove previous code definition. Family means one or more living together on the premises of a dwelling unit, but shall not include more than 5 persons unrelated by blood or marriage. And to remove that language and defer it to what is currently being used, occupancy limits established by International Property Maintenance Code, IPMC. And due to the fact that it was potentially overlooked at one time. The
Okay.
end.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question.
The motion passes unanimously.
Great. Thanks,
All
Emery.
right, that's all I have.
Okay,
We made it a little more complicated than you thought.
Sign code is never not.
okay, Commissioner comments.
No.
Commissioner Kessel.
Thanks for
Carter.
everything this evening.
Thank you.
I
Carol?
actually have a question. How do code amendments get initiated? Like, can the public come and sort of dispute where sidewalks are required? Do they have to make a petition to change the sidewalk exemption list, or how does that work?
So there are a couple of different questions there. So let me navigate to our planning fees, because I do believe that it's possible to initiate a code amendment as a member of the public, but there is a cost, I believe, to the application.
There's an application process.
There's an application process. Let me just navigate there. But I will say that they're separately and apart, as I'm trying to do 2 things at once. There is a list of exempted streets that is in the engineering standards. So the code references that we will keep a list of exempted roads, and there's a process for that as well. So let me go, I need to look at both of those things in order to give you the full answer.
I remember working on the exempted streets list, or at least looking at it a few years ago.
County Code 135. Drives me nuts that it's called county road.
I know, it's not in.
It actually,
anymore.
it may not be in here.
I was sick.
I know that it is something that can be initiated by staff or by planning commission, or city council.
Yeah.
By planning commission too? Or only city council?
I think by planning commission as well, but the sidewalk exempted list does not live in code. It lives in the engineering standards, and that is something that would be amended by city council alone
Okay,
because it was adopted by resolution.
okay.
And we did put into code or into the engineering standards a process.
Because I mean, typically, most text amendments that are applied by the public are for rezoning. That's technically a text amendment. So we rarely see text amendments that are submitted like to change the actual code.
I mean, I can use a personal example. When there was a problem at a crossing and a sidewalk, et cetera, I just called the city engineering. And I had to go through steps there. And they took me to other people.
Well, the thing is, like Palmer and Minter and all those streets stuffed against the hillside over there have a sidewalk requirement. And there's no place to put a sidewalk, but the people over there are kind of grumbling because they still have to pay, even though there's nowhere to build a sidewalk.
I feel like that's.
So there is a piece of the code that allows for the city engineer or the director to make a determination, but it has criteria that's with it.
Yeah.
So let me answer the first question, which is the streets list in the engineering standards is anticipated to be amended by resolution. The only streets that would be recommended to be added to the list are those where a public outreach process has already taken place, significant engineering for road reconstruction has already been completed, and the city engineer and the public works director agree that a sidewalk isn't needed or that only one sidewalk be installed. So to be added to the list, like 135 Road or Midland Avenue, where we determined that only one sidewalk is needed or trail, then to be added to this list of just exempted streets, it requires that we've done all this work, that there's a public process, and that the city engineer and the public works director agree.
So how does the public process begin? Is
So
that like
for
public
example,
noticing?
when we did the reconstruction project for the Red Mountain neighborhood, there was a whole process that we went through with the neighborhood,
Mhm.
and the neighborhood had feelings about whether or not they wanted sidewalks, and the city engineer and the public works director had also concerns about making sure that we're having people move safely, especially to bus stops for schools, that sort of thing. So what we ended up with was, I think in most cases, one sidewalk where there was not a sidewalk at all when we did that reconstruction project.
So if you have a house on, does the city determine which side of the street said one sidewalk will occur on? So if you own a property that is on you got the sidewalk side, then you have to pay the fee in lieu, but if you're on you don't have to have the sidewalk side, then you.
And so most of these exempted streets are ones where we're doing a reconstruction project. So a bunch of the streets from Cedar Crest are on that list, but we did a reconstruction project where we built the sidewalk. Does that make sense?
Because they didn't initiate construction to trigger the sidewalk requirement.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and when I did my request, they were reconstructing the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So it was already in process. And so
Mhm.
that's how the change actually happened. Because it was already done, kind of. The engineers were already kind of looking at that area.
Yeah.
So.
And then there is an exemption. Sidewalks are not required on local streets in districts where the minimum lot size is 1 acre or greater, or in steep slope areas where sidewalks on one side of the street may be approved to reduce excessive slope disturbance, adverse impacts on natural resources, and potential soil erosion and draining problems, according to the director of the city engineer. And on the limited list of local streets maintained by the engineering standards. I mean, the idea is that the code wants us to build places for people to walk safely.
Right.
And so that is why we used to have a requirement that it be everywhere. So this is much more flexible, but it still allows for there to be sidewalks that are built. And then also that that we take fees so that we're able to do those pedestrian improvement projects elsewhere.
Mhm. That's what I tell the griping people. Okay.
I thought it was interesting in the last meeting that there was discussion of taking the fee in lieu for sidewalk and making speed bumps in the street. And I know in previous commissions, there was a strong opinion that those fee in lieu should be strictly for sidewalks or trails. And
Pedestrian improvement.
not used for other uses. So it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting how things go in flux sometimes as far as.
And I'm not certain whether or not it would have been eligible for that. All fees paid pursuant to the section shall be deposited into a separate fund, which funds may be used to undertake future projects to accommodate pedestrian improvements. So I don't know actually whether or not it would have met the definition.
Yeah.
And we do have other fees or other dollars that are in the city budget that are related to traffic.
safety.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that answer.
So I just want to say thanks to Trent for all his work.
Yeah.
He moving on to Eagle County, and wish him well and thank him for all that he's done for us here.
Yeah, thank
We
you,
will
Brent.
miss him.
Yes, definitely. Director comments.
I don't think I have anything. Other than to say that we are kind of nearing toward the end of the comprehensive plan process. So we will have one steering committee meeting left, and then there will be an additional meeting where we'll review the draft of the plan. So definitely come to the September meeting if you can.
What kind of input was there given? Did you get good input in the last public?
Sunday one at the church, Sierra Park.
We had about 40 people there, I think, and we'll have more open house on Thursday. So it's here at City Hall, here in council chambers, and then into the hallway. We'll use the hallway concourse in a way that we may have never used before during the day, but we are going to get creative about using the space. So I think it'll be great.
Will the September meeting be available by Zoom as well?
I think our anticipation is that it will be here and that it will be staff driven. And we were not contracted to have the consultants be physically present for all of the meetings. So that is part of the reason why we didn't have them for this
But
last
I'm not
meeting.
gonna be here, so I might still like to attend remotely if I can.
I don't know that it's going to be like sticky notes and moving things around. I don't know how we would do a hybrid meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I did one of those and it was a waste of time.
Yeah. I kinda remember that. All right.
I feel bad for you, George.
Okay. Meeting's adjourned. So I won't be here.